Install the XE2800 fabric modules in the 4 EFM slots on the back of the chassis. When you install an XE2800, the power LED will rapidly flash amber for a few seconds. It will then start flashing amber about once per second. As the XE2800 boots, the flashing will change to green. Once the card is fully booted, all the LEDs will momentarily light up. Once the boot process completes, the power and active LEDs will be solid green. The boot process can take a few minutes. If the alarm LED lights up, try reseating the card. If that doesn't resolve the alarm, you will need to log into the management software to identify the alarm.
Okay, so I've got the XE2800 fabric module here. This fabric module is installed in the back of the chassis. Right here, there are going to be 4 slots, so you'll have 4 modules with each installation. The module fits in very snugly, and one of the things that you want to make sure, so you want to pull out the clasps here, make sure that those are fully extended. And when you insert the module into the chassis, you just want to be really careful to make sure that it is fully seated. Use the clamps to make sure that it's in there, and then give it a nice little push afterwards. There's 4 of these, and again, it's a really snug fit. So you want to make sure when you install it, you make sure that both sides are fully seated into the chassis.
In order to maintain proper airflow through a Z77, you must install air management boards, or AMBs, in empty slots. The fan pulls air into the bottom of the chassis, forcing it up through the cards and the AMBs. Air exits the rear of the chassis at the top. If the AMBs are not installed, air will flow out of the front of the chassis and will not properly cool the cards. AMBs ensure proper cooling of the shelf and line cards. Install the AMBs after all line cards have been installed. Also, ensure that the rear AMB and filler plate are installed on the rear of the chassis. The chassis ships with them installed, but verify that they're in place. They are required to ensure proper cooling.
Okay, so what I've got here is this air management board. This fits into any chassis, Z77, Z33, or Z22. And what we're using this for is to control the airflow through the chassis. As you can see in this chassis right here, we have several slots that are open, not being used by any line cards. And we want to fill those up with these air management boards to help the airflow move through the chassis. If we don't use these cards, what's going to happen is a lot of these cars can overheat because we've just got air dumping out the front here through these open line card slots. So we want to fill those up with these air management boards so that we can make sure that all the cars are getting the proper ventilation. To install the cards, the air management boards, you want to make sure that the clasps are fully open. Go ahead and slot it into the empty line card slot. Push it in until the clasps catch, and then use the clasps to seat it all the way. Also included in the Z77 installation package is a cable management cover. This is a clear plexiglass cover that will fit onto the back, and there's one for the front of the chassis as well. These are going to be used to protect any cables or fibers that are going to be plugging into the back of the chassis or any line cards in the front. Now, one thing that's important to make a point of is that these covers have a protective coating on them. It's very easy to remove. You just grab it like this and peel it off. And there are also some magnets on these guys here to help them stay on the chassis. To install the protective covers, you just want to line the little slots up like so, and then you just slide it right in place, and you should feel the magnets catch. And again, you want to make sure that you remove the protective coating before installing it on the chassis.
The Z33 is Ciena's environmentally hardened packet optical transport platform optimized for edge and aggregation deployments. The mid-size Z33 system balances flexibility with low cost to efficiently scale network capacity at the edge. This video provides an overview of the installation process, but is not a substitute for the installation documentation. Before you begin installation, be sure to read and understand the installation guide and pay particular attention to the warnings and cautions. Also, be sure to follow local site practices and codes. If you have any questions about installing Z-Series equipment, contact Ciena support. The Z33 fits standard 19-inch racks and is 5 rack units high. It has 6 horizontal line card slots. The left side of the chassis houses the operations panel, fan, and fan filter. On the bottom of the chassis are 2 slots for the Common Equipment Modules, or CIM. Snap-on guides along the right side of the chassis provide fiber management. On the rear of the chassis, you'll find connectors for power and ground, system and environmental alarms, timing, and management. Installing a Z33 has 6 high-level steps. Start with physically mounting the chassis in the rack, then installing the fiber guides. Once the chassis is installed, connect the ground. This helps protect the shelf from electrostatic discharge. After the ground is connected, you can connect the power. The first power component you install should be the fans. The fans run at full speed until the SIM cards are installed, so you should install the SIM cards immediately after installing the fans. After that, you can install the rest of the components. The main thing to remember is that the chassis must be properly grounded before installing any components. The Z33 ships with brackets installed for a flush mount and a 19-inch rack. These brackets can be repositioned for mid-mount installations so that the front of the chassis sticks out from the rack. The mounting brackets can be removed and reversed for an installation in a 23-inch rack.
Hey everybody, it's John Snee from Ciena. We're here in the lab today and we're going to be going over the installation of the Z33 chassis. As you can see, the chassis is already out of the box. We've already mounted the rack ears. As you can see, there are 2 different mounting positions. One is what we would call a mid-mount, but we've installed these ears here so that we'll flush mount with the front of the chassis being flush against the front of the rack. Okay, so one thing that's worth mentioning here about these mounting brackets that come with the Z33 chassis, again, we've got this teardrop-shaped hole, and it's worth mentioning that this teardrop-shaped hole is going to be at the bottom screw hole of the second rack unit. So if you can imagine, we've got one rack unit about here, a second rack unit is going to be about this right here. So we want to make sure that when we put our screws in the racks, that we've already got a good idea that this right here is going to be the top of my rack. I've got 1, 2 rack units, and I've got this mounting screw right here waiting for me to go and slide the chassis on. Let's take a look and see what this looks like here. So again, I've got my chassis. I'm going to go ahead and just slide it right on. The chassis is secure. I'm just going to go ahead and support it with my hands while I go ahead and finish up with the rest of the screws. There we go.
The Z33 includes 6 plastic snap-on fiber guides that install on the right side of the chassis. To install the fiber guides, slide them into place.
So after getting the chassis installed, it's important to put these fiber guides that come with it in. So the way these guys go is we want the slender part facing the inside of the chassis, and there's a groove in here that'll help guide them. So it's kind of hard to get them in wrong. So again, we're just going to line this up right here, give it a nice little snug, and you'll feel it pop into place. We'll continue on, just putting them all in until we run out.
Power and ground connections are on the rear of the chassis on the right side. Before connecting the power, you must connect the chassis ground to your building earth ground. Once the shelf is properly grounded, you can connect the power. The Z33 has dual negative 48-volt power feeds that require 20-amp fuses. Before connecting the power, verify that both the A and B feeds are supplying the correct voltage. The installation kit includes a power harness and a ferrite suppressor. Before connecting the power, loop the power cable through the ferrite suppressor about 6 inches from the terminal block.
Now that we've got the chassis installed, the first thing we want to do is ground it. So the Z33 chassis comes with the ground strap and a few screws here for you to go ahead and get this thing going. It's worth mentioning that we're going to ground the chassis to our rack, which is again grounded to our main ground bar. Before you just go ahead and start grounding the chassis to the rack, you're going to want to make sure that the rack itself is grounded. So just a little FYI there. The importance also of grounding the chassis before doing anything else is we don't want to put any equipment in this guy without having the chassis properly grounded, because otherwise we could short out a card or otherwise damage some component that's going to be installed into the chassis. So again, we mentioned that the ground strap comes with the chassis. There's going to be a 2-hole lug on one side and then a single-hole lug on the other. It's worth mentioning that the 2-hole lug is going to attach to the back of the chassis, and then you've got the single-hole lug over here that can either attach to the ground, to the rack, or to the ground bar. Okay, so before we go and start installing any power cables, the first thing I want to do is verify that the positions on my fuse panel are not live. So I'm going to use my multimeter here to verify that. Alright, so we've got the return and battery, and we've got minimal voltage here, so we're safe. I'm going to go move over to the second spot. First return, battery, and again, minimum voltage, so we are safe to start installing. Okay, so we've got our power harness dressed in. Now the technique for doing this, the technique that I prefer anyhow, is because the power harness comes with some terminal rings on the end that's going to connect to the fuse panel, I start dressing down from the fuse panel to the chassis, because this power harness here is going to be about 10 feet long. Okay, so we're going to have a lot of slack in most cases. So again, when we dress from the top down, it gives us the ability to cut the excess slack off the power harness, and then reattach the power connector so that when we get everything dressed in, there's no slack, everything's nice and tidy. So before we go and really start plugging anything into the chassis, we need to connect this ferrite noise reducer onto the power harness here. Alright, now the strategy is we want the ferrite to be about 6 inches from the chassis. So we want it to be at least about back here somewhere, once we tighten everything down. Let's go ahead and get that guy on there. So what we'll do is make a nice big loop, like that, make sure we're double backed. Here's our ferrite noise reducer. It's a tight fit. Alright, so now we've got our ferrite installed on our power harness here. We've got about 6 inches, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, right here from the ferrite to the power connector. The last thing we want to do is we want to verify just one more time that we don't have any live power on our power connector here. We can do that by using our multimeter and checking against the little screws in here. And then once we verify that, we'll go ahead and plug it in, power up the chassis. Alright. Now that we have the power harness and male power connector plug connected and dressed in. We're going to connect it to the chassis. We're going to slide the connector in. Make sure it's seated all the way. And once we're finished, we'll give it a nice tug and make sure everything's connected nice and tight. Alright, so we got our fuses installed in our fuse panel, and now we're going to do one last check to make sure that we have good voltage on both the A and B sides. Alright, we got negative 53 volts, looking good there. And another solid negative 53.
Install the Z33 fan module on the left side of the chassis. The module includes the fans and the fan filter. To install the module, slide it along the guide rails located on the left side of the chassis until it engages with the shelf backplane. Once the fan module has been installed, the fan LED should be solid green.
Okay, so now that we have the Z33 chassis racked, stacked, and powered up, it's time to start filling it with the equipment that's going to go inside the chassis. We're going to start with the Z33 fan module. The fan module comes with a nice filter here that slides right out, so you don't even have to pull it out when you go to service it. You don't have to pull the whole fan module out, that is, right? So you just slide this thing right out, right there. You can replace it, and then when you're finished, it'll slide right back in all the way. So now we're going to go ahead and install this thing. And as you can see, it'll just slide right in.
Once the fans have been installed, you should install the Common Equipment Module iTemp, or semi-cards. Install the semi-cards in slots A and B below the line cards. One semi-card is required, but 2 are recommended. The semi provides the timing subsystem, telco alarms, inventory management, fan control, and active standby arbitration for Z33 and Z22 shelves. The cards are iTemp rated. The semi-card includes status LEDs and a craft port that is used during shelf commissioning. See the user documentation for more information on the semi-card and its functions.
Alright, now that we got the Z33 fan module installed, you can hear that the fans are going quite rapidly. They're making a lot of noise here. The reason for that is because they don't have anything in that. The chassis doesn't have anything in it to tell the fans how fast they should be spinning. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install the semi-card, the first semi-card, in slot A. Now as you can see, I've already disengaged these latches here, and that's because we don't want them to get in the way of the card insertion. We'll just go ahead and slide this guy down in there. And we'll let the latches engage by the chassis, and then we'll use them to insert the card the rest of the way. And now you can hear the fan module is starting to calm down, not making so much noise. The fans are spinning a little bit less quickly. All right, now that we have the first semi in, we're going to put the second one in slot B. Again, you can see I already have these latches opened up.
When the semi-card is installed, the power LED will be solid red for about 1 second. Then will start flashing green as the card boots. After about a minute, the power LED will change to solid green, indicating the card has finished booting. On the active semi-card, the active LED will be solid green. Connections for system alarms, environmental alarms, and timing are on the rear of the chassis on the right side. Pinouts can be found in the Z33 installation guide. The management port is also on the rear of the chassis. The connector uses a standard RJ45 Ethernet cable.
Alright, so now that we have the fan module and the semi-cards installed, it's time to put in our controller cards. The controller cards that we're going to be installing is the PME412 And we actually have two of these that are going to go in. So you can see here that I've unlatched the locking mechanisms on the faceplate of the card. And then we're going to slide the card in. I'm going to push it in so that the latches catch. And then I'll use the latches to get the card seated the rest of the way. When we first install the card, we'll see it'll flash red momentarily. And then it'll flash a fast amber. And then we'll get a slow amber. So then finally, when the card's fully booted up, what we'll have is a solid power, a solid active, green, and then a blue sync light. Now we're going to install the second controller card, which will be a PME 412. Okay, next we're going to be installing a WSS F4 card. This is one of our ROTEM cards, and per our recommendations, we prefer to install the ROTEM and DWDM cards in the top two slots.
In a Z33, the fan module pulls air in from the left side of the chassis to cool the cards. Air exits the chassis through vents on the right side of the chassis. In order to ensure proper airflow, you must install air management boards in all empty slots. Install air management boards after all line cards have been installed.
Lastly, we'll be putting in the air management boards. These boards are important because they keep the chassis from overheating as they control airflow. I've got the latches opened up here. We just slide them right on in. All right, getting the rest of these guys in here. The last piece of the project is going to be putting on the plastic cover. Now this cover ships with an opaque plastic film over it, so you want to make sure that you pull it off and it's on the outside as well as the inside here. And again, we don't want to put this on until we have all of our optics and fibers and everything in there and we're ready to protect those with this cover. When you're ready to install the plastic cover over the face of the Z33 chassis, it's important to keep in mind that there's some tabs that are going to slide into some holes right here, these nice slots that we've got. All right, so we're going to line up the tab with the slot on the bottom, tilt up, line up with the slot on the top, and then push. Again, it's important to make sure that all your fibers that are going to be coming out of the side of the chassis are out of the way so that we don't pinch any fibers while we're installing this cover.
The Z22 is seen as compact, environmentally hardened packet optical transport platform, optimized for deployments at the network edge. This video provides an overview of the installation process, but is not a substitute for the installation documentation. Before you begin installation, be sure to read and understand the installation guide and pay particular attention to the warnings and cautions. Also, Be sure to follow local site practices and codes. If you have any questions about installing Z-Series equipment, contact Sienna Support. The Z22 fits standard 19-inch racks and is 2 rack units high. It has 2 horizontal line card slots. The left side of the chassis houses the operations panel, fan, and fan filter. On the bottom of the chassis are 2 slots for the common equipment modules, or SIM. Snap-on guides on the right side of the chassis provide fiber management. On the rear of the chassis, you'll find connections for power and ground, management, timing, and alarms. On the left side of the chassis, there are terminal block connectors for timing and alarms. See the Z22 installation guide for pinout details. On the right side of the chassis is a terminal block for power and 2 screw holes for the ground cable. The ground cable and screws are provided with the chassis. The management connection on the right side of the chassis uses a standard RJ45 Ethernet connector. Installing a Z22 has 6 high-level steps. Start with physically mounting the chassis in the rack, then installing the fiber guides. Once the chassis is installed, connect the ground. This helps protect the shelf from electrostatic discharge. After the ground is connected, you can connect the power. The first power component you install should be the fans. The fans run at full speed until the SIM cards are installed, so you should install the SIM cards immediately after installing the fans. After that, you can install the rest of the components. The main thing to remember is that the chassis must be properly grounded before installing any components. The Z22 ships with brackets installed for a flush mount in a 19-inch rack. The brackets can be removed and reversed for installation in a 23-inch rack. The brackets can be repositioned for mid-mount installations so that the front of the chassis sticks out from the front of the rack.
Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about the installation procedure for the Z22 chassis. We take a look at this guy, you can see that we've already repositioned the mounting brackets for a front mount and we've tilted them outwards so that we can mount it into a 23-inch rack. What we're going to do is we're just going to pick this guy up here, slide them all in. The nice thing about this again is we don't have to waste rack space because the airflow is lateral instead of horizontal.
The Z22 includes 3 plastic snap-on guides that install on the right side of the chassis for fiber management. To install the fiber guides, slide them into place.
Once you have the chassis mounted, one of the next things that you're going to want to do is put on these fiber guides here. They slip just right in. Give them a nice little push, and you'll feel them snap into place.
Power and ground connections are on the rear of the chassis on the right side. Before connecting power, you must connect the chassis ground to your building earth ground. Once the shelf is properly grounded, you can connect the power. The Z22 comes in negative 48 volt and plus 24 volt versions. The negative 48 volt version is shown here. The negative 48 volt version requires 2 15 amp fuses, while the plus 24 volt version requires 2 25 amp fuses. The installation kit includes a power harness and a ferrite suppressor. Before connecting the power, loop the power cable through the ferrite suppressor about 6 inches from the terminal block.
So before moving any further with the installation, we need to get this chassis grounded. Now the racks that we have here in our lab are grounded to the master ground bar elsewhere located in the lab. So I'm just going to go ahead and ground this chassis to the rack itself. You'll want to make sure that if you do decide to ground the chassis to the rack, that the rack is grounded in some shape, way, or form. Let's get it going. The Z22 comes packaged with a ground strap and also with plenty of mounting screws for you to get the ground strap attached to the chassis and the rack or ground bar. The key thing to note here is that there will be 2 screws that will go into the back of the chassis, right? So the ground strap's going to come with a dual hole lug on one end. That lug needs to butt right up against the chassis here. It's going to connect right here. As you see, there's 2 screws. Now we've dressed in our power harness. You can see that we've got a nice loop here with our ferrite noise reducer around the harness. We've got at least 6 inches of cable exposed here before the termination point. And now we're going to measure the voltage and start installing cards. Once we get the power plug inside the chassis, there's 2 screws on either end of the connector. We want to make sure to get those screwed in tight just in case anybody knocks the harness and we don't lose power to the shelf. Okay, so you can see we've got a negative 53 volts here on the A side and a negative 53 volts on the B side.
Install the Z22 fan module on the left side of the chassis. The module includes the fans and fan filter. The fan filter is pre-installed on the left side of the module. To install the fan module, slide the unit along the guide rails located on the left side of the chassis until it engages with the shelf backplane. Once the fan module has been installed, the fan LED should be solid green.
Alright, so now we're going to talk about the Z22 fan module. It slides right into here on the left side. So when you install the Z22 fan module, you want to make sure that the fan filter is facing the outside of the chassis. Just put it in like this, slides right on in.
Once the fan module has been installed, you should install the Common Equipment Module iTemp or semi-cards. Install the semi-cards in slots A and B below the line card slots. 1 semi-card is required, but 2 are recommended. The Z22 supports installing a LAD2G or LAD2P module in slot B on the right side of the chassis, instead of a semi-card. A LAD2P is shown here. These LAD modules provide 2 DWDM channels of add-drop capacity and must be installed in slot B when used. The LAD2P and LAD2G modules can be installed in either the plus 24 volt or negative 48 volt chassis. The Semi provides the timing subsystem, telco alarms, inventory management, fan control, and active standby arbitration for Z33 and Z22 shelves. The cards are iTemp rated. The card includes a status LED and craft port that is used during shelf commissioning. For more information on the Semi card and its functions, see the user documentation. The Semi cards for the negative 48 volt and plus 24 volt chassis are different. Be sure you have the correct version of the Semi card. The negative 48 volt version is shown here. The faceplate of the plus 24 volt version is blue on the left side. When the Semi card is installed, the power LED will be solid red for about 1 second. Then will start flashing green as the card boots. After about a minute, the power LED will change to solid green, indicating the card has finished booting. On the active Semi card, the active LED will be solid green.
Once you have the fan module installed, it's time to put the Semi cards in. Before you put the Semi cards in, you'll want to make sure that these latches are in the open position. That way they don't get in the way of the card installation. We'll just slide the card right in, engage the latches, and then use the latches to install the card the rest of the way. Now we don't have a second Semi card to go into slot B, so what we're going to use is this air management board that was designed specifically for that slot. It's very important that we use these for any empty slots in the chassis because they help manage the airflow control.
Connections for and timing are on the rear of the chassis. Pinouts can be found in the installation guide. The management port is also on the rear of the chassis. The connector uses a standard RJ45 Ethernet cable.
So one thing that you may want to do, depending on your installation scenario, is install an Ethernet cable into the management port on the back of the shelf. Next, we're going to install a controller card into slot 1 of the Z22 chassis. This particular card is a PME 216. I'm going to open up these latches, slide the card in, push the card in until the latches are engaged, and then use the latches to seat the card the rest of the way. Following the first card, we'll put in the second one. Again, making sure that the latches are open. Slide the card in, engage the latches, use the latches to seat the card the rest of the way. If you don't have a card that's going in the second slot, you need to make sure that you use an AMB, or air management board. Once you've completed the installation of your Z22 chassis, it's time to put on the faceplate cover. This cover is designed to protect any optics and fibers that are going to be coming out of the front of the chassis here. You'll notice that the cover has an opaque plastic sheet over it. This needs to be removed before installation. You'll also notice that there's a tab and 2 magnets that help attach the cover to the chassis. The tab will slide into the bottom slot in the center of the chassis, and then we'll just roll it forward and push it in.